Aloha. Today I come from Kauai, and I have my beautiful sister Solé, who is now in, where are you at right now, sister?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, Soleil is a beautiful sister. She is a rap artist, an herbal medicine woman. She works with all kinds of beautiful, magical, mystical dance and martial arts. She's a martial artist and a women's empowerment leader. And it's such an honor to have her here today to really discuss different things. That we were just on an Egypt trip together, and we were really discussing the depths of the goddess and the mysteries of the goddess, especially the ancient goddess, and the names of Kemet in a way that was opening for me. And I learned a lot from you, and you were there with me, and you were teaching me, which is a lot of the way that it always is. And so I really wanted to bring my sister Soleil here, just really so that we could have some of these conversations with you, and to really bring forth one of the things that has come up recently is just really witnessing, like, my sisters of color, indigenous sisters, and how I've been in these spiritual communities for a very long time, and mostly it's been primarily Caucasian, and I always felt like actually not fully able to be in my truth as an indigenous woman. And that was one of the things that we experienced in Egypt, was just that kind of like viewing it from the eyes, I think, of a brown person. Life from a brown person. And I say that, not in regards to, isolate or, anything about anybody else, but just we experience things a little bit differently. And what I love most about Soleil is that she is a rap artist, and she brings through these lyrics and brings through the expression and the voice that really, really shares her essence and the power of being a brown person, and what it is to be in this world. So I hope that's okay as an introduction. I'm just kind of going with what flows.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Soleil. And
oh wow, every time I'm that question, I'm like, where do I start? So to keep it brief, because that could be a very long intro or conversation. um, I'm my mother's child. I'm my father's child. I was born in the Midwest in Missouri to a very multi-ethnic family, born from a Black African woman, and then also have um, uh, Tamil, South Indian, and European roots. European roots in my dad, who's in Germany right now. And but I grew up very much um, since we talked about ethnicity and identity in the beginning, very much identified as a Black woman, and that's how I was raised, and raised by a Black woman, and raised by the African and Black communities, and then but very much embracing all of humanity and all of these cultures. And but I grew up. Talk about these roots in hip hop. I grew up diving into hip hop the first time I heard it, like being, a mother was a singer and a performer, and so many people in my families are, artists, singers, very creative in that way. So it was in my blood, and hip hop captured me when I was really young, like 6 years old. I remember learning all the lyrics to Rapper's Delight, and I started, like, as a teenager, young teenager, 12, 13, writing my own lyrics, rewriting other people's raps, and just found that I was really good at it. And so I would, like, compete with the boys on the bus, and, in our community, that was a big thing. We rapped on the corner, and we were like break dance and had our radios, and and I got a record deal at 16 that I my dad didn't end up letting us sign because it wasn't a good deal. So I went to college, had kids, dropped out, decided I wanted to pursue music again, and ended up getting a record deal in my early mid-20s, and put out an album called Skin Deep on DreamWorks Records. The DreamWorks, that's like the movies company DreamWorks, they had a music division at the time that was new, and got signed to their label, put out this album. Was very much a really hardcore hip hop album. And that was really what, at that time, hip hop had it started with these very, somewhat conscious, but very, there were conscious roots, but there was also party roots and, the braggadocious feel of hip hop. But then it became the very conscious era where my husband, who is Professor Griff of Public Enemy, they ushered in this really very conscious and revolutionary movement in hip hop. And that then transitioned into this, after that, this very hardcore, more gangster affiliated, violent expression of hip hop. And I came into the industry professionally when that era was taking hold. And so though my album wasn't an album that promoted any of those things, it was still very much, people will call it like really hardcore hip hop. It had a lot of profanity, a lot of, sexual innuendos. It had a lot of, just street elements to it. And some of it was what I grew up seeing, experiencing, but a lot of it was just, we're writing what is expected of a hip hop artist at that time. And so after the album came out, I felt really disenchanted. I didn't, with the industry, with the direction I had gone, and my spirit was speaking to me like, that's not what I want to do. That's not what I want to promote. And so after, some really deep introspection, contemplation, prayers, I really decided, after that one album, that I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to pursue. I really wanted to go on this spiritual path and really find myself. And that, ultimately is what happened. I started out on this religious path of going back to my roots, which were Christian, raised in a Christian church, and then outgrowing that box of what in the West, especially through the Greco-Roman lens of Christianity that we're taught here, and started studying, religion from a historical standpoint as well as devotional, and just really dove into a lot of different spiritual paths, learning about different ways of being, learning about different spiritual walks and religions. And, the walk ultimately just brought me back to myself, which is what the path is designed to do all along. So I went on this long journey, 20-year hiatus from music, studied yoga in India and martial arts, which I had been practicing martial arts since I was a kid. It's martial arts and herbal medicine and Kemetic spirituality, which is Kemet is ancient Egypt, what it was called before it became known as Egypt. Studying, different mystical paths, sacred dance, belly dance. I became a doula, a birth doula, studying birth, and just these very deep feminine ways of being, these very mystical, spiritual women's paths, sound healing, taking what I had done in music and studying sound from a healing aspect, and study that with you, and and just really, really going deep into the essence of who I am, as opposed to the ego facade of who Solé the artist was. And so it's been a really long journey, and now I'm back here with a new project. I never thought I would do music again, but I put out a new album September 28th, which was 20 years to the date that my first album came out. And that album is called Encoded. And I never wanted to do another album at first. When I left, I said, I don't want anything to do with the music industry or music, but I had to go back and recreate a project and put out a project that was really deeply from essence, and that was show the growth and evolution, because Spirit told me directly it wasn't just for me, and that I did have to share that, and not just in the ways that I teach in classes and workshops and all these things I do, but I had to offer that musically to show that evolution and growth, and not leave that one project I put out in 1999 as the only musical representation that I left in the earth realm. It's like, no, you have to show this growth and evolution. So that's the long and short of it. That was still kind of long, but it would go so much longer if I told even more detail.
I find you so fascinating, and just have so much respect for your path and journey and how you cross barriers as well. One of the things we talked about in Egypt was how a lot of the communities stick to each other, the different ethnicities and different things like that. And you've kind of crossed all barriers. And I think same as me, maybe because we do have all these different bloods inside of us, it's like we feel, for me, I've felt like the call to study many different things and really be a rainbow bridge, a rainbow grandmother to really explore, my Native American roots, my Mexican roots, my, more of my Celtic roots, and just really to understand Asian roots even, I mean, Mexican is a mixture of African and Asian. So it's like that African Asian connection. And really, yeah, it does. It goes back to, the essence of the one. And it's that place where, when you were saying, when you first started talking, even right now, it's like bringing up emotion for me. Because I can feel like when you were talking about rap and you were talking about how everything went into the violence, and it's interesting because it was such a huge part of our culture in the world. I mean, rap just went so big, and it shows the power of how music can really affect the world. And how our words and what we say and what we express and how we express it, has the power to get out there and get in that earworm and really, like program the culture and the consciousness. And so when I listen to your raps and I feel you just as a sister, there's so much power that I feel, especially when we were in Egypt. And before we went to Egypt, you had written about Aset, and you were writing, you were sharing about the Black Madonna and the original culture. And it really touched me deeply because there's that part of me that knows so deeply, like we see a lot of the Caucasian version, or the Grecian version, or like you said, the Roman version of all of these archetypes. And it's kind of like, for women of color, it's like, where are we? But when we look in our culture, like for me in Mexican culture, you have the Virgen of Guadalupe. When I went to Poland, it was like the Madonna was Black, and all of the different, so there was always that curiosity of, the true ancient mother. And so I feel like that's not brought together so much, in a lot of teachings. And that's why I was like reaching out to you, like I want to do more of a course together and really, really bring her back to life, bring her back, and bring the unity back, and the awareness back to where the original, where we come from, the original mother.
Yeah, because it's so many people just don't know, and we don't know what we don't know. And so history has been so twisted and tainted and rewritten, and and stolen and co-opted in many ways. And it doesn't, for those of us, it only benefits those that have ill intention, that have the intention to subdue and to position themselves as superior. it benefits those people. It doesn't benefit the rest of us. It doesn't, but it really, it doesn't benefit in general to not know the truth of, who we are as a human race, and to know and understand that just, as above, so below, as this earth, this universe, how all of us, how we spiraled out of the darkness, out of the black womb, the universal womb, and then it was replicated here on earth, all of humanity spiraling out of the womb of the original mother, the original black woman, the original African woman. And things have been so turned around that we now look at her throughout the world. People don't like to talk about it. Like you mentioned, we talked about before, especially in our spiritual communities, people don't like to talk about, the fact that the black woman is relegated to the lowest of all, of women on earth. And she is the original mother. And until she is elevated back to her rightful state, we will continue to be in turmoil all across the world. And women in general, until we are elevated back to our status as sacred, to our status as divine, will we continue to see turmoil here in this earth realm until that is until we reclaim that divinity and sacredness of woman. And I say especially the black woman, because she was the supreme being that was originally worshipped as the great black mama goddess throughout. But we get, because of where we are and how history has been tainted, and it's been legacies have been stolen and things twisted around for other people's subversive purposes. So many people are unaware. Even black people will look at their own people. We'll look at our own people and look at them as lower than, as less than, and think that we have to go look to others who have taken, for instance, you look at Greek philosophy and the Greek goddesses and the gods and goddesses. That's all ancient Kemetic spirituality. And in ancient times, the Greeks had no qualms with letting it be known where they received this wisdom from. They went and sat at the feet of the Kemetic ancient Egyptian priests and priestesses and learned these sacred sciences. And this was sacred African science. They were the first people, Africans were the first people on earth and gave birth to everyone else. So of course we would be the first scientists and mathematicians and artists and creators in all these ways. The Greeks, if you go back far enough, you find that they gave honor to originally. They acknowledged where this wisdom came from, but somewhere down the line, and they took it back and used it in their own way, in their own cultural way, knowing and understanding the wisdom and the science behind. But at some point in time, things got turned. Things got twisted, things got stolen, and it was claimed as our own, as opposed to giving reverence to the original knowledge and wisdom where it came from. And that's where the problem lies. Not that even in our own work, we see this now,
That's what I was gonna say.
It's the same thing happens. We learn, we get this, people get knowledge, they go learn from other people, and then they don't acknowledge their teachers or where this came from and claim it as their own. One of the things that I constantly, and I'm very big on, is anytime I go to speak, teach, I always make it very clear. One, I'm not teaching. I'm helping you remember things that are already embedded into your DNA, that is already encoded, and I'm just helping you to awaken it. But I acknowledge that this is not this isn't my original science. This isn't my original knowledge. I acknowledge all the teachers that I have learned from and the lineages, that the threads that hold this together. Because it's, to me, it's just very disingenuous and antithetical to a spiritual path to claim things that are our own that are not. And it doesn't it's not helpful in any way. It's when we acknowledge those roots and we acknowledge our teachers and we acknowledge the lineages from which we pull wisdom, it's so empowering. it's really empowering. But when we're in our ego, as opposed to true essence, and drawing from that energetic golden thread that connects all of the lineages, and we cut off that power as soon as we claim it as our own.
Exactly.
We become less powerful, in the work.
Yeah,
In
and
the work that
if
we're
you
doing.
look at one of the major things that's happening right now in the USA is, the US Constitution was based on the Iroquois grandmother's teaching.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and now, this country had its indigenous people, and the indigenous people shared the ways, and then it got colonized, and
Yeah.
this colonization, right now is in such a turmoil. Like it's funny because I come from New Mexico, and New Mexico was colonized basically by the United States, or actually back in when Spain was here, and all of the different indigenous areas, especially right around the borders of Mexico, and people my whole life have told me, like, go back to Mexico, and I'm like, you were in Mexico, like, you're like, we never asked, we were just living, and all my ancestors, living right there along the border, just being
Yeah.
native indigenous people to that place. And it's, and the derogatory energy, that's this constant from white superiority, and people don't even realize, like, how they project that in so many ways, like the colonization that happens through entitlement, and
Yeah.
just like this, unconscious. I feel like a lot of it is very unconscious, just like I saw it a lot in Asia, I saw it in many different countries that I traveled, to, and just seeing how the dynamic of, like, I have some brothers, some deep soul brothers that are really, really dark black skin, beautiful, and just how they would be treated, just by waitresses, or, and it didn't matter what culture it was. And just seeing, like, when I was in Japan, like, they didn't want to be dark, everybody wants to
Yeah.
whitewash their skin. Everybody, and it's like bleaching, the skin, just to take away the darkness,
Yeah.
and yet, in most cultures of more Caucasian cultures, they're laying in the sun to get darker. So
Yeah.
we have these really strange programs that are going on within all of the cultures across the world.
Yeah.
Those that are of brown skin, especially deep dark brown skin, really understanding, the feeling of this,
Yeah.
and like for me, I'm in the middle, in the sense of, I wasn't white enough, and I wasn't native enough, and I wasn't Mexican enough, so it was like, where did I fit in?
Yeah.
And of course you're going to be categorized as being, like for me, it was like I was categorized as Mexican because I looked mostly Mexican.
Yeah.
But yet in the Mexican community, I wasn't fully accepted because I couldn't speak Spanish, very, very well. And I, so they were like, oh, you're they called me a Oreo cookie, or like, brown on the outside, white on the inside. And so it's a lot of confusion, inside of our psyches, because we do have a lot of these multicultural experiences going on in our bloodlines.
Yeah.
And for me, I get very emotional with the dark mother, because I know her in my
Yeah.
soul, and I feel her as the Mother Earth, and as Sophia, as, the expression of existence. And so when the truth touches upon that, and I see her, in my visions, her skin is so dark that it glistens, like the starlight, and I don't even know how to express that. And it's this beauty that overcomes my being, and the sadness, the sadness in me that all of our children have to suffer, from the separation of that connection to her, and that came through, with the big white God,
Yeah.
the big white God in the sky, that, that was the overseer of everything. And
Yeah.
And so healing that relationship between the black mother and the white god.
No, it's
In our
really,
consciousness.
yeah. And racism, white supremacy has done a number on every one of us globally. It is not just in the United States. As you mentioned, it's across the board. Has it in its destructiveness and what it's done. And we experienced this traveling to Thailand with my children. My two younger daughters are really, really, really light. I mean, they're lighter skinned than me, even though, you know, their father is black too. And they're really, really, really pale skinned with this curly hair. And we got to Thailand, and I remember we were we were there for about a month and a half, and we rented a bike, you know, a motorbike the time we were there. And so we would go drive by sometime and sit and talk with the woman who rented the bike to us. And she noticed, as because my girls in the sun, they'll get really, really dark. It was they had, when they got there, they were really light. They hadn't been in the sun much. It was winter time. We were coming out of winter. And so as she noticed that they were getting really brown, and we got there, and she was saying how, oh, your hair is so beautiful, the curly hair is so sexy. She's saying all these things. And then she tells them, but you need to stay out of the sun. Don't get any darker. You don't want to get any darker. And they looked, and, you know, my children go to African-centered schools. So they're really knowledgeable of the system, this global system of racism, white supremacy, and how it has infected the entire world, not just black and white relations in the United States, but the entire world, and where everyone across the world hates blackness. Everyone across the world. And when I say everyone, of course, I don't mean, but I'll say this, we don't mean every single individual. We know there are, you know, exceptions to everything. So of course, not every white person hates black people, but it has been ingrained into the fabric of who they are, who we are. It has been pounded into the head and spirit of people throughout the world that black is bad, black is negative, and white is superior, when actually we all know that black was the original. And that we see this, and it's like everything being completely flip-flopped and upside down, but for them to actually experience it and see the women there with skin bleaching cream on, destroying their skin, destroying the powerful melanin that they have in their skin, and hating themselves. But I literally looked at her and asked her who taught her to hate herself.
Wow.
You know, where did you learn that from? Who taught you to hate herself? She didn't even understand what I was asking, because it was just so deeply ingrained in their culture. We see this throughout the world, where you go, even so much now where there's skin bleaching creams being sold in Africa.
Wow.
You know, in West Africa, you know, and we see this happening, that people hate themselves so much because of the damage that the system, because it is a global system, the system of racism, white supremacy, and even those that think they're not affected, or that they're not racist. You know, I bump into, you know, some beautiful, well-meaning, you know, white people that think, oh, I'm not racist and I don't see color. But the very thought that you don't see color means that you have some work to do, because you do. There's beauty in seeing color. You should see color. We should see all the differences, but know and understand that you are not superior because of that. You're not superior. And but we do see and experience that, you know. And growing up, I grew up, even though I was in this, you know, like you, sometimes they'll call it racially ambiguous. You're not quite sure what they are, because kind of fit in, depends on what my hair looks like that day, or what makeup I have on, or what I'm wearing. People think I'm all different kind of things, but I very much grew up knowing and understanding and being raised as a Black woman. And so that is the standpoint, that is the point of reference that I come from. That is my cultural experience. That's how I was raised. So I have seen and experienced racism from a different side, but I've also been able to be on another side where people don't view me as that, and seeing how they look at and view Black women, Black men, how they're demonized and vilified. And I'm like, we're the original mothers and fathers of creation. And so when we get back and understand that, that it is not to be, especially in the spiritual communities, just bypassed and brushed off and say, oh, but let's just love and light and get over it and get away. No, we have to deal with it. We have to deal with it and understand what it is, and not pretend like it doesn't exist, not pretend like we can just love and light it away, but do your part in your work. Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said people who classify themselves as white, who wish to be taken seriously and who are righteous and responsible, will only talk about ending white supremacy and racism and replacing it with justice. So you have to do the work, but the work is not to be done by telling Black and brown people how to respond to oppression, how to engage other white, how to engage white people in dealing with it. It's their responsibility to talk to their own, to fix their own, to share their own communities, but not to, because I see that a lot of times too. There'll be spaces that are specifically for people of color, Black women or brown women, to heal. Because, and now it's very different when you take a space that's created for a group of people that have been oppressed and suppressed for thousands of years. And we know that genetics, we know that through our DNA, that our DNA is changed through trauma. We know and understand that just because we did not suffer from being enslaved, we still suffer from our ancestors being enslaved, because there is shown scientifically that our DNA changes happen through great trauma. And so this has been passed along, especially here in the United States and the West, through African American people, through indigenous brothers and sisters who were not able to speak their own language, who had their hands beaten when they spoke in their native tongue, who had to learn to be civilized as if what was brought was civil, or it was not. And these very barbaric practices that were enforced on people that were already civilized, that were already living in tune with nature. But those things had very dire consequences still to this day, that we see in the Black community, that we see in the Native American communities, that we see in Latino communities, that how we've been taught, one, to hate ourselves. We've been taught to think that we are inferior to when we were the original people. And so it is no just get over it and forget it and let's not. No, this is deeply
angry. You can't be angry at all.
Yeah, it's like, but anger informs. So, what do you do with the anger? Anger is normal. We should be angry about what happened. But what do you take that anger and do? Do you transmute it into love, alchemize it into love? Absolutely. But we don't deny that we have a right to. We don't deny that it still needs to be discussed, that it is still an issue, that it is still a problem, that it still are many Black men being killed at the hands of cops. There is disparities between white and Black people being sentenced in the United States strictly based off of race. So we can't deny these things, but we also do have to move towards solution, because we also can't say, okay, so this happened, and as a Black person, I'm going to hate all white people who did that. In my opinion, that's not the answer either. We do have to coexist. We all are interconnected. Everything we do affects each other. So even if we segregate ourselves off in our quiet little spot by ourselves, and it's just about us and our own race, well, what everyone else does affects everything else, because the waterways are interconnected. The air is all connected. We're all breathing the same air. We still all, just energetically, the collective conscious or unconscious, still all affects one another. So we have to acknowledge, though, we have to understand, and we cannot, especially white people that are on this path of enlightenment, of awakening, don't dictate to Black and brown people how they need to come into their own awakening, how they need to. It's, you have to worry about enlightening and making your own people aware of what has been done systematically and globally that they may not even be aware of, that they, in ways that they may not even know that they're entitled, that they are living. Because we hear so many say, oh, I'm not entitled and I have to this and I have to but this is systematic. This is not just on a day-to-day basis that we're talking about. It's a very systematic, it's a global system. Racism, white supremacy is a global system that has affected the entire world. And it can be very subconscious, or it can be unconscious. You may not even know. It's in very subtle ways too now. We see some very overt things happen, but so much now it's very subtle. Yeah. This is subtle ways, the institutionalized racism that happens.
And one of the things that, that I've gone through as, like, when I was little, when I was growing up, I was the darkest of my family, and I was the one with the most curly hair, and I had names like, they called me, and this is really derogatory, but I'm going to say it. I was called, my grandmother called me nigger baby. My cousins called me Uganda nigger, and I mean, and yell it across the whole, the whole street, and as we were playing outside, and it was this constant barrage. Even my parents said my dad wasn't my real dad, that, cross-white, the Black man that he was friends with was my father, and it was always this thing. And so I grew up with this, actually, these two aspects. There was this love for like, if that was true and that was a part of me, there was a love for, being Black, if that was the truth,
Yeah.
And a curiosity that sparked within me, to really connect with that roots of energy, because somewhere it was in my field. Yeah. And then also there was the other side that became a colonizer. It was like I could, when I was first awakening inside of my spiritual path, I had these two very distinct aspects. I had my Native American grandmother, who was a very strong spirit guide for me. And then I had this other part of me that was playing out the patterns of my lineage. So my lineage is Native American, and we were Pueblo Indians in one side of my family, which was Tiwa or Tigua. And they were stolen basically from the white, my white ancestors, grandfather, and made basically as slaves, because they didn't know how to live in that part of the world. And so they were getting sick, and they, so basically they just basically took them, and they were very kind people, like, and very wise medicine. My grandmother's a very wise medicine woman, great grandmother. And seeing that kindness and that, I can see that inside of myself as well. So there's these two edges that I was fighting within myself, which was like, not having the sensitivity to the other part of myself, that it was this constant kind of like, I want to be part of the white man's world, and I want to get what's mine, and then, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be, in this way, and then on the other side, recognizing, but I'm here to serve, and I'm here to love, and I'm here to connect to the earth. And, and now in my life, coming into the balance within that, coming into the deepest places of learning, how to honor both sides, and also to really see and take the responsibility and the accountability for that in my life. So I feel like it's a personal journey for each one of us, to really recognize that there is that colonizer inside, and where does that colonizer mentality, which we call, capitalism, which we call, we call business or whatever it is, where does it come out, in a way that isn't conscious.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting you use that colonizer within. And we, you know, even those of us who aren't white or classify as white, we have that because it's been beaten into the psyche. It's been so infused into us that we had that all of us that we all have to, in order to ascend on this spiritual path, we have to rid ourselves of that mentality, of that type of thinking. But you don't do that if you don't understand what it is. And so that's why we can't just bypass. And, you know, so many people just, we want to live, it's beautiful to live in the heart space. We want to live there. We want to live in the heart. We love feeling there and coming from love, but we have to learn, study, acknowledge, know what's going on, and acknowledge and understand that that's the only way. When we think that, or bypass it like, oh, that was back then and that's not now, you know, we don't further our own cause of ascension. We don't further and grow our own energetic, the energies of our heart. We don't grow that by ignoring the truth or separating ourselves off. We can't, if we don't know what the problem is, if we can't acknowledge that it's still a problem. It doesn't mean you have to live in that space. It doesn't mean that you have to take on and feel that you, because I know a lot of white people say, well, I didn't own any slaves. I didn't do this and I didn't do that. Yeah, but there's still, the system still exists. And so until you understand the definition, because it's very different when you hear a true working definition of what racism really is, of what white supremacy really is. And I love to pull this one from one of my, she's an ancestor now, but a great teacher that I gleaned a lot from, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, who I mentioned before. But she says racism, white supremacy is the local and global power system and dynamic structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity. So that includes economics, it includes education, it includes entertainment, it includes labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. All of these areas of people activity for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, the planet upon which the vast majority of people are classified as non-white, i.e. black, brown, red, yellow, by white-skinned people. And all of non-white people are genetically dominant. This is what racism, white supremacy says compared to the genetic recess. So she says this in saying that they think and believe this, and this is how the system is maintained. Whereas the vast majority of people are on the planet are non-white. So all of non-white people are, they prop themselves up, again, consciously or subconsciously, because even if you know and don't think that, the system has been established to put you on a pedestal and make you believe and feel that you are, and you're still treated in that way.
Well, this is
a genetic recessive trait. So not that you're inferior, because they're not. So as I mentioned before, as she said, these people who classify themselves as white and wish to be taken seriously in general on this spiritual walk, in this spiritual path, just in general as a decent, righteous human being. If you are righteous and responsible, then you will talk about ending racism, white supremacy, and replacing it with justice, with mayat, with truth, justice, reciprocity, all of these things. Because if not, and you're not talking about it and it's happening, then are you really on and about this path of ascension, of reclaiming the sacredness of humanity in general, coming back into a oneness and knowing that we are all interconnected, that you are not superior. But for some white people, if you take away their whiteness, that's that. What is there left? if this is what you've built yourself up on, if
Yeah.
this is what makes you feel like you're something in the world, you take that away, it's like, what's left? And that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
And can be for some of them. So, but we have to understand this, and we have to acknowledge it in our spiritual communities and circles. It doesn't mean we have to dwell on, people are like, oh, we're still dwelling on this. Oh, we're still talking about this. It still exists. So just an acknowledgement and an understanding of that, yeah, it does exist, and not bypassing it and doing your part, whatever that is.
Yeah, I would like to share on that point about, like, how are we perpetuating it in the, in the spiritual communities,
Yeah.
which and part of that is through the light polarization. Light is good, dark is bad. It's like that comes, from that. And then the colonization aspect, it comes from competition. It comes from, non-inclusiveness.
Yeah.
One of the things that I went through, in my healing journey, coming from such a density of suppression, of suppressed ancestors and suppressed energies, was, as I was starting to heal all of that, like, you probably understand this, like, just moving through leaps and bounds in my consciousness of all of the programming, that we were just discussing. And rising it, of course there was anger that was coming up, of course there was the rage, but always being seen as like, if I spoke up, or if I spoke out of love and light, not in the realm of love and light, and was strong, or asserted my power, then that was too much. And it was, it was like, oh, Amma's just an angry person, she just doesn't, she hasn't found compassion in her heart, and so what I've seen with this whole experience is, like, that of course perpetuates the same, the same thing that continues to keep happening for people, where it keeps one sector of the group, categorized in this, oh, angry black men, or like everybody just gets categorized into this lump sum. But then when you actually, like, bring up topics like this, even when you were saying these things, I could feel, like, the fear coming up in me, like, whoa, this is really real, to say these things, like, how is the white audience going to respond to that? How are they going to feel when experiencing this? And that's part of what I wanted to bring up in these conversations, because I have friends of all colors, of all nations, of all races, and what I've really recognized a lot is that what I wanted to do with these conversations of real talk was actually, like, really talk about real things, that I talk to with all of my different friends, and really, like, bring it out into the, into the eyes and the ears of people that are seeing, like, how can we change this experience? So that's what I'd like to talk about, is, like, what can we do as a collective and as an individual, to be able to look at these subconscious patterns of suppression, repression and oppression.
Yeah.
Because as people start to awaken, of course they're going to be angry. I went through all of those stages, and I still go through layers of them. When I encounter people that are super entitled, because there's a natural, as a Mexican woman, I grew up basically to serve. It was like, you served your husband, you served your family, you served, and to feel like, for me, I had to give 200%. And if I faltered in giving any of that, I wasn't even worthy of existing. That was the programming and the mentality that was brought up within me, to the point where now it's like, I've got some, issues with parasites going on, and really, like, dealing with the fundamental foundations of my ancestors. Basically, my grandma died of liver cancer. My grandfather died of cirrhosis. My dad, had diabetes. So these, we're healing, like, massive cultural programming, really. This is all deeply embedded within our genetics, that we are having to reclaim the sovereignty of our being and our body and our cellular DNA to transform it, into a higher octave, which some of the spiritual principles of love and light, they apply, but others don't, and it's the teachings of the Black Madonna. It's the teachings of this deep primordial mother, like when people go to her, what do we call her? Sometimes we call her Kali or Isis or Sekhmet, or, it's like, when we go to, or even ayahuasca, we would call her, but when we go to her and we look at the truth in ourselves, within this primordial mother, we see all of the faces of all of that we have created in this existence, and how it's all intertwined. And so on the other side of that, what's interesting is, like, here in Hawaii, I was thinking of Hawaii when you were speaking, and even of Bali, like you were saying, like, what is it, in certain countries, like, travel a lot to third world countries, and the wages that the people make in Bali are servitude. You know what I mean? It's so, it's the same. And you see the colonization of people coming in and, taking advantage sometimes of, of that. And what do they call it? Like, I don't even know how to pronounce, like, gentrification or something, where it's like they come in and they, take something and then they make it westernized, and then the prices rise, and, and then the people can't even live there anymore.
Yeah, can't afford to live anymore. Yeah.
And that's happened here. That's happened and it's all built on the basis of taking advantage in some ways of the locals, and that was one of the reasons why I left Bali. Because in some ways, it's great to live like a king and a queen. But when I started to see, like, the Balinese, who were these, when I first was there 7 years ago, these sweet, really sweet, loving people, and then just really starting to see, like, their spirit, kind of falling, because, they're the one doing a lot of the backbone of the work of everything. And, here, we come in to colonize, and creating, like, all of this from them.
Right.
And so for me, it's like, whenever I'd go shopping, whenever I would hire somebody to do something, like, I would always pay them what their value was and more.
Yeah.
And because to me it was like, those are my ancestors too. My ancestors were Mexican, and, taken advantage of and paid under the table, and, all of these different things. I was the one that was behind the pedicure chair.
Yeah.
And the rich people were coming to me, and, so it was like, I've played both roles. I've been on both sides of the experience.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that, is huge. It's huge, to, when you have the power, how do you use that power?
Exactly. Yeah. How do you use that power? Yeah. And it's something that we have to, constantly check ourselves on, because we know that there's levels of privilege. So even as Westerners that are non-white, we still have a level of privilege throughout the world as we travel, that because of
1 second, we have only a few minutes on this one, so I'm going to have to create another one, and then we'll put a part 2. Okay.
Okay.
So thank you so much. This is part 1 with, this is such a juicy conversation that we're going to have a part 2. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Thank you.